Hi, I'm Jesi, William Melvin Kelley's eldest daughter.
And I'm Aiki, his wife.
And today we are going to read an excerpt from his novel Dunfords Travels Everywheres. My mom will read that. And then I will read an excerpt from the essay that I wrote about Dunfords. And we hope you enjoy.
All hues in particular, Mr. Chiglisle, but Prime Minister Schill, his elf Hinch, and their huff cannot be lawed to monsterize our discussion. What about the female Occidental? To illustrate the why Miss Adelbody Schillersoft eels around the manor, how's about turning over to the chase of an humble ice-flown for westward after-chain, Uncle Turtom, living but weary-king in a circus, a lowly sweeper-upper in behind of a fortifant. We journ old Tom so collared, one day shortly after what, if we be linguistically correct, we must call the second intergenerational, untralinguistic, anti-republican confrontation. We find him subbing and watching his foolifant, tinking with the idea of putting roast shocks in a box and selling two for the one fantastically new punnet, when his boss told her, the an hands dan Schillersif, executionerative protestant of the runda world grabber piece and bargainum fightin', sir of course, hat pinned up in a blue three-button tatter-colored sweat. It's some like Addo Baby, a one-time exactabat at bending her long legs behind her neck while suspended on a rope of the hair just over the broad and puckered forebrain above the heads of the multitudes. Since his rebirth from the ward, weren't able to steeple to the top of the tent on his type. There to oversee the souse, pet the pewint, surround an arrow in a quiver. Moisture didn't toin her rolled and round any more. So it came Tam to seek Tame, the bug show's shoot scooper, asking of home the wherefore of his womb finder to answer the riddle of Adelbody's diddle. His horner, Master Shall, having noticed that no sunner that the sun shipped under the horizon, and old Tim Ayrton soaped off the orphans, hat the aged raconeur was a swarm with a Hiram of malmirable admirers. Betty Southern, her child, one among them, in grin shorts, slit to her chuckle-covered ribs, and a halter hitching up her high dibble-dooples. Of case Maester Prudident didn't come moot with his problem, but Reuter patted Tam over the head and crooked his mouth into a grin. Tom, my slave, how's the family? Your aunt, Maida, when I was a bay boy, used to rock me on her bosom like my own mammy. I met your old Conacrease, boat bringing her from the Mission ferries, who salted her pre-caged in pork iron, a bibble under her harm. She nellied at my tired old mother's dead side at the moment she passed winding over the great dividend in a wooden-covered wagon of decompassed illness. Maida, when she was but a wee bit tight, tended my further the Kernhell, who felt gravely sick after one of the slows, a wappet, forgot to warn him the time the wood hoose caught the fire. Faith-filled and ever Maida she feel? Fine. Oh, years, those were God dies for anybody. We used to sleep of the michas, never reaching for the pistol tucked unfired under the pillow's ear. I'd hitch up my bogey, two Arabian stullions spiking Swahili, piling it, and raid out to see my biggers singing spirituals in the cotton fields. And a shappier bunch of laboratoritatives have never seen by any onion shop steward. How could a goodies work hurt any toddy? They knew how well off they was. I lady and me, as truly lied, bought them unter the light. We sieved yum from the savagery consuming Puerto Rico, given the grief of civilization. You are happy, will you, as peas in a stomach, as stew in a spit, as Tamintau Jews in a bloody merry-go-round. Tom listened, the bogus smile on his face that any sudden colonel could club for. Do you know what he's snowing, Mr. Chigold? Do you know the weeping of the weak? Let those with whippings more with poor, while you on bented skis will serve up arson eke and scribbled eggs and pancakes, humberly miser, and put a possum pin in the collar that mass wars. His Majesty didn't see that, but only stooped to inquire, and what if some of y'all did in Reburn? Cost treble, ruining in the street, dis dry in puberty, while we were Viking the bulls bowls. Open the doily paper, and the headlines make you choke in your coffee. But not my Uncle Tumas, lawyer illitrue. The Mrs. wrote often to tell how nurse you'd been when she got nervous and all. Now she's umply and cratcheting. My bonus didn't even her out or has her to or fro. She doesn't coo or goo. Says it's me. Could it be? Wanna see? How it be? I tell you, I'm in Missouri and have to be showing in. Pet me on a bed and tell me the answer, please. 'Cause shick, saint we all fellow brothers like Abel and Canine, or Robinson or Crusoe and his good fine Fedoy? But Tom be one schooled in the uses of Sir Sobians. Pon my soul, your Horner, the hub he spoke, yam honored, Parson Terry sore prized. The ringleader clummin' to the roustabout a problem so personal. Let me stretch my gray-matted head for a minute, but you realize I just a joker at heart, ain't in the club, and on Diamond can only give a spy aide's advice, which, being going at a lady's body, go down left, then pull back up and gosh down right, thin pole beak and grouse done center, as for ass it can go. Oh. Marcel Schillersheff buried his Peter, repeated Toucham's instructions, and wound round circus grounds. The dog-faced boy to gritting, the Sammy's fod lady rumping with her twins, mild wide, toward his home, and ladle buddy, who waited now aboard a bed, silk kimonoed, feet combing in rulered hair, while hands held to a noose weekly. But that reunion were not to become about case. Tolem's fainter fools, a recipient of 1850 shuckalofs, the gift of a child or man, had pulled up stake, and a new world before his ivory, had commenced to question Messrs. Sheechill's shimmy. He was a true crusader, that Felifant, so nominal remanded and caged, not seal, or Alice, or cat, or gnat, or aardvark, or ox, the latex being a flea male named Uxley, Essie recall, and hide over hulls enamored of the elephant's horns from a first day admired them. They ran-paraded that reimbursing evolutionary band, touring tent, detiring wagon, until that foolifant's every leader having a flow, humping to pass misery shut-chills open wide O to be, and glancing in, unpacked his trunk, gong to declef musically, to the riot, to the center, to ooh, 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 just like Tom Boo. Now, Mr. Char Cycle, we really see the ituation. Star it. Take a nut. Under the bushkin, always a bright head. Behind the manger, a manager. Bend an image, and doubt squeezes a man, a swarming up the same stream, and he macks it because he must. Mike no mystic about the lesson. Mr. Carlyle. How else could Thomason play his tune or tone his sight? Could he be more imwoman than Anabama else? After sunset on SETI, he too sits eye-sighted on his books and lukes endlessly upended, and Miss Aromarica's weathered, dwithered, depilatory F's, her pea-tailed pushers, her posher pickle, her plosier cooker, her ovarn, her pottle pipsicolon, her fugitive refrigerator isometer open tall, her transvestirized portable radio door aim and fem, her filtered sugarettes, her sternless steel razors, her parfumed soup, her unpolstered furniture, her three-spin stereo changer, her chrome-plated, reinforced, bumperized, cheddar-resisting, wind-whippered, automatic, clutch-driving carcass. How could our Tamarai not succumb? But here's something to take a hold on any dark captuary night. Our Phelan font, pleased to notice, dispirited though he's mired been, untie-dyed not his Afropian heritage, and had nodding to be doing with that horned ox.
Words about Dunfords because the words in Dunfords are work. We begin with a quote from Joyce from A Portrait of the Artist. The language in which we are speaking is his before it is mine. I cannot speak or write these words without unrest of spirit. His language, so familiar and so foreign, will always be for me an acquired speech. I have not made or accepted its words. My voice holds them at bay. My soul frets in the shadow of his language. My father, William Melvin Kelley, read the Bible to my sister and me, a chapter or two a week, every Saturday, beginning when I was about 8. By the time I moved away from home at age 22, we had managed to read the Bible in its entirety from Genesis to Revelations at least once, the Old Testament maybe twice, and the Pentateuch several times. Consequently, several of the Old Testament stories have been burned into my memory. One in particular is of the Tower of Babel. According to the story, after the Great Flood, humans multiplied and gained knowledge, and with that knowledge decided to build a tower high enough to reach heaven. God saw this and decided it was not good, confounded our language so that we couldn't understand each other, and scattered us across the earth. As a young girl, I wondered at the reason. My father was a deeply spiritual man and believed that God was infinitely merciful, kind, and all-knowing. But I couldn't really fathom any kindness in humans confounded and not able to understand each other. Wouldn't God in his kindness and wisdom want for us to be unified? Wouldn't we work together better if we all spoke the same? Wouldn't there be less war, more peace, and greater unity if we all understood each other? Isn't human kindness predicated on understanding? During my childhood, there was no internet, no Facebook, no Twitter, no Google Translate. Whatever books or texts I read or learned from were written in the language I spoke at home. But then the internet happened, and more recently, the automatically translated internet, with the result that cultural lines once defined by spoken language became decidedly blurred. One day I signed into Twitter and read something that rubbed me the wrong way. I started to respond, but quickly realized that not only had the tweet originally been written in another language, it was about a situation that had nothing to do with anything I was familiar with. Twitter had automatically translated it, and I hadn't even realized. I was responding solely because I read the message in my default language, but as a result, I was missing context and nuance. Suddenly, the story of the Tower of Babel came to mind and began to make sense. When everyone is speaking the same language, we automatically process information purely because the information exists and is understandable, though we filter it based on what we know. Whereas, if we don't understand what we are reading or hearing, we automatically relegate the information to a less important space or ignore it altogether. On the one hand, we erase the possibility of other contexts and nuances with translation, whilst on the other hand, without translation, we erase everything. And then there is the added component of dominance. If everyone has adopted English as the lingua franca, it is highly likely that some people are speaking this way due to colonization, and it is also highly likely that everything they think or feel to say in their own language will be automatically relegated to a less important space by the dominant culture. We can call this by what it is, racism. We can also acknowledge that any work that seeks to maintain context and nuance while uniting languages to express and experience one that is not accommodated by the colonial lingua franca will require different tools. Which brings me back to the Tower of Babel and the concept of a dominant language. The language my father created in Dunfords is the sound of beginning, a sound picture of the colonization of African peoples across the diaspora, but more specifically to those of us in the U.S. who experienced a particularly brutal and degrading form of slavery. We were stolen from a place where our languages and dialects told our history, our lineage, and our clans, and brought to places where a dominant language, not our own, was forced upon us. And ever since, everything we know about ourselves is told to us with words that aren't ours. This is really the point of the language of Dunfords. Dunfords is the story and the healing of us in our own words. As my father was most proud of and said often, the daughters and sons of Africa are resilient. We survived, and we survived because of our ability to improvise. Like jazz, we improvised on the conqueror's language, riffing a way to talk to each other. We are constantly improvising. That's how we survived, he said in a conversation with Professor Mariam C. If we had been rigid and rocked down in our beliefs and our ways of dealing with things, we would not have survived in America. We wouldn't have been able to adapt to the change that we had to undergo. You put us in the ghetto, we adapt. You put us in a rat-infested ghetto, we tame the rats. We always survive. Upon Dunford's publication, the critic Christopher Lamenhout reviewed the novel for the New York Times, comparing it extensively to Finnegan's Wake and questioning whether it was worth the trouble to decipher either of them. He noted that, to make complete sense of the parts demands a familiarity with black argot that only certain blacks and precious few whites possess, not to mention one's need for at least a casual acquaintance with Bantu, Coptic, Pidgin English, creolized language, and God knows what other languages, although here I admit I'm purely guessing. This statement feels flippant and vaguely racist towards both African Americans and the Irish, as if our languages are unworthy of the effort to understand, and therefore to be relegated to less important spaces. Yes, one could argue that Finnegan's Wake needs familiarity with an Irish dialect and several languages in order to make perfect sense of it part by part, but that surely isn't the point. In either case, the trick is to read it out loud to yourself, relaxing into it, as if in a dream. You'll soon find yourself a wick to spike Mr. Chiglow's languish. We'd like to thank Rosie Snadger for including us in this edition of the Cambridge Literary Review, and we hope that you enjoyed our little video essay. Thank you.